All right, I tried to start filming this and then my dog started screaming at a squirrel. So we're gonna hope. We're gonna hope and pray that Cookie the squirrel goes away. We called her Cookie because we live behind a Subway and she likes to steal Subway cookies from their dumpster and bring them onto our porch. So it's a little bit of a fun time keeping the dogs away from the chocolate chip cookie stash that the squirrel brings. But we like her, so she stays and we just make sure that she doesn't bring chocolate onto our porch. That aside, tangents aside, hello, my name is Catherine. My name is Catherine. My name is Catherine. That's not a great representation of what the past month has been like for me and why I have not posted an episode in a month. Ooh, nothing is. I use they, them pronouns. My name is Catherine. I use they, them pronouns. I am the creative brains behind Ginger Dog Knits. I'm an independent knitwear designer and also a knitter and spinner. Been knitting since I was 11. And I've been spinning for about the past 2 years. So relatively novice at spinning, but I'm a decently seasoned knitter. And that's actually what I want to talk about today. I have a couple of current projects that I want to share with you, but before I do that, I'm wearing this sweater for a reason. I'll start off with what I'm wearing. I'll talk about my sweater in a sec, but first and foremost, my feet are freezing. I made these about a month or two ago. These are the Cadeautje slippers by Ysolda Teagues. Wonderful. Teague, singular. I'm thinking of Janine Teagues from Abbott Elementary. Phenomenal show, but that's besides the point. Sorry, Ysolda. These are lovely. They're a pair of thrummed slippers. These are knit out of American U Bulky, one of my favorite yarn brands of all time. I don't usually knit with bulky weight yarn. It hurts my hands, but it just really makes for a really toasty slipper. So here we are. And then the fiber that I used for the thrums is BFL from Frabjous Fibers in the colorway Cathedral. And as you can see, it has felted very nicely inside and has turned this lovely shade of brown. The point of thrums is to felt, so I love these things. I wear them constantly. My house, I live in a mobile home and the floor isn't super well insulated. It's an older home. So the floor gets really, really cold in the winter, even if it's like above freezing. So I've been wearing these religiously. But the real star of the show here is this sweater. This is the first sweater that I ever made. So I wore this on purpose today because I found myself wearing this a ton lately. And it's gotten me thinking about kind of where I started knitting patterns and creating things that weren't just square shaped, and kind of where I am now designing garments. And that's been a big theme for the past week or so for me. So this sweater, this is the Shifting Gears Pullover by Turquoise Toque Designs. As you can see, it is not very well fit. This is supposed to be a pretty fitted pullover. It's just a plain old round yoke. That was actually a great place to start for me, but I did not gauge swatch correctly. And also I was paranoid about my knitting puckering because this was my first time, knitting stranded colorwork on a fitted object that wasn't like a hat or something. So I ended up knitting it way too big, but somehow, even though it's too big, the sleeves are too short too. And so is the body, for that matter. Oh man, it was a disaster, but I actually wear this all the time because it is the perfect I don't give a fuck what I look like sweater. I wear this thing around the house constantly. I'm always throwing it on over a t-shirt. It's not super heavy, which is nice because I inadvertently built in a lot of ease on this thing, so a lot of airflow can get in between my body and the sweater, which this being an air and weight sweater is not usually the case. I tend to fluctuate temperature very, very drastically, and you'll see me talk about this a ton because it really influences what I make for myself. I am either really, really hot or really, really cold all the time. So it comes from a combination of autism and Hashimoto's disease, which I actually just found out I have this past week. And I'm going to let my dog out really quick because she wants to skedaddle. But that means that a lot of the time I have to knit really lightweight garments if they're going to be long sleeve. I also I have plans for a lot of short sleeved garments because I'm learning that the long sleeves just don't do me any favors. So I have to really be mindful when I'm creating garments that, is this going to be something that I can layer easily? Because I can go from overheating and sweating and overstimulated to freezing cold and like shivering in like 20 minutes flat. And I can fluctuate in between those two extremes all day, regardless of the weather too. So like, obviously when it's really, really hot out, I'm probably going to stay really, really hot. And if it's really, really cold out, I'm probably going to stay really, really cold. But for the most part, I spend a lot of time in that in-between zone where I'm like, oh my God, I'm hot. So I take off a layer and then I'm freezing cold. So I put a layer back on. This is a great layer to be able to do that with because I can just throw it on. It's big enough that I don't have to worry about taking a layer off underneath. It's pretty nice. So I inadvertently really like this sweater, even though I don't like the way it fits me, because I can just throw it on if I need to go chase my dog outside and pry the stick out of its mouth. I can throw it on if I'm, just sitting on my couch and I'm a little bit cold and this is the closest thing to me. It's great. I don't care if it gets dirty because it's acrylic yarn. I knit it out of Lion Brand Woolies, which I fucking hate that yarn, but that's what I had at the time, so I didn't want to waste it. I knit it into a sweater and I will never use that yarn again. I do not like the way that this yarn feels. It's very rough on my skin. I'm only wearing it solo right now because even though I usually wear it with a t-shirt underneath, I actually don't like the way that that looks. I think it looks kind of sloppy. So in the event that I'm filming something and trying to look a little bit less schleppy than usual, I took the t-shirt off so you could actually see how it fits my body. But the answer to that is not well. And I think it's a great representation of how something that goes horribly, horribly wrong can actually be beautiful in a totally different and unexpected way. And I think that's something that I'm learning about my design journey as I move along. I'm a pretty new designer. I only ever started designing patterns about 2 years ago. And I only published that pattern last spring. So it's been a long time coming to actually have a backlog of published patterns. This is like, you're not seeing the 2 years of research and practice and work and rewriting and writing and rewriting and designing that happened behind the scenes. You're only just now seeing patterns that I designed 2 years ago. So thankfully my process has gotten a lot quicker and my creative vision can be realized a little bit more in a timely fashion. But all that to say, I'm a very different designer now than I was 2 years ago. I'm also a very different knitter now than I was when I was 11 or even 2 years ago. My knitting journey has not been linear. When I was a kid, I would just knit garter stitch squares because I didn't know how to purl. I was teaching myself out of a library book. I did not have very good access to the internet. I was a really sheltered Catholic school kid, and I wasn't really allowed to browse the web to the same extent that my peers were. I was a rule follower as a kid. My sister was not. My sister could find the most obscure craft tutorials and things like that online, and I was never brave enough to break my mom's rule. So my parents were very adamant with us about internet safety, and for good reason. But as technology kind of progressed and it became very normal to be on the internet, I ended up being a little bit of a technological late bloomer. So because of that, there was a long period in my knitting where the only thing I knew how to do was cast on, knit, stitch, bind off. So I would just knit just scarves that were taller than I was, and then I would frog it and just keep knitting out of the same frogged ball of yarn. I would knit little square blankets for my American Girl dolls. I never learned any other skills than that, but I got really good at casting on, knitting, and binding off. So when I picked it back up in college, I ended up stopping when I was a teenager because I had other stuff going on. I was a very, very active teenager. I was doing a bajillion dance classes. I used to ride horses before I became disabled, and holy cow, I did not have time to also be knitting, and I was very rarely sitting down anyway. So I picked it back up in college as a mental health coping tool, and I challenged myself to learn how to purl. I learned how to increase and decrease. I made my first hat. My mom still wears it all the time and insists that she bought it, but she's wrong, because I made it and I remember making it. And I remember what yarn I used and everything. I don't remember the brand, but I remember what it looked like. And all of that process reminded me that like that time that I spent knitting garter square swatches was not wasted, even though I didn't do anything more complex than that, because now my knitting tension is excellent and I have a great muscle memory. I'm a really slow knitter, but I can do it very consistently and I pick new skills up really quickly. So it's been a really cool evolution to start in that space, not having any real skills, but being really good at the few that I did have. And seeing that reflected in my designs, because I started out with a plain vanilla sock pattern. And that's all I was doing for a while because I got really confident with socks. And then I branched out to a little bit of shaping, a little bit of brioche, a little bit of fun stuff, a little bit of color work. And now I'm sitting here having designed my first fully graded garment pattern last week, which is a gigantic accomplishment for me, because if you know me, I have been like reverse hyping myself about grading since I started designing, and I've always been terrified of grading a full pattern, and I just did it one day. I did it in 2 days. I graded a full pattern and wrote it in 2 days. That is absurd. Granted, I was in ADHD hyperfocus the entire time, which isn't healthy, and I do sort of regret that because I felt like shit the next few days, but I did it. I did the really hard thing, just like I did the really hard thing when I was making my sweater. And no, it's not a perfect pattern. Still have to knit the sample. I always write my patterns before I knit the sample so I can essentially test it myself. That's my style. But I did the same thing with this sweater. I just said, screw it. Why am I so afraid of knitting a sweater? And I just cast it on and did it. And it doesn't fit right. And it's a mess, but the colors look good together. And I get compliments on it still. And even though my knitter's eye can see the wonky decreases in the arms and how short they are and how disproportionate it is for my personal taste, most lay people don't know and most lay people don't care. So it's really cool to get that perspective sometimes if I decide to wear it to work one day and someone says, oh my God, I can't believe you made that. It's a good reminder that, oh my God, I made a piece of clothing and that is incredible. It's really easy to get caught up in the details of like being frustrated about one little thing in a pattern. And I've been thinking about that a lot the past week. So that's why I wore this today. It's a great sweater. I would knit it again. I just wouldn't knit it this way, but I've got another, I think I finished this about 2 years ago, was when I really got really back into trying new things with my knitting. So in those 2 years, I've successfully knit garments that do fit. And I've proven that I can do that too. So I would reknit it for sure. Just not in this yarn and not for this fit. Fun stuff. 15-minute ramble about feelings and growth and sweaters aside. I have a lot to show you all, so this might be a little bit of a chatty one. I'm still working on a lot of the same works in progress that you saw last time, but they're a lot further along, so we'll take what we can get. And I also have a crap ton of design news to share with you all. I don't know why I'm sitting on my hand like this. It's weird. But I have a lot of design news to share with you all. So I'm excited to be able to do that too, because it means that there's stuff happening behind the scenes that y'all are going to get to see right now or very soon, which is awesome. Before I get into business, I did rearrange my space a little bit. I have a little art wall now. Got a little humidifier going. I've got my sock yarn all sorted finally. My partner and I just a couple of months ago decided to try sleeping in separate bedrooms because I have a CPAP machine now, and it's really hard to sleep with that thing on. I'm autistic. I have a lot of sensory issues, and sharing a bed to begin with is tough for me, but sharing a bed with a CPAP mask and 2 dogs and a partner who also likes to sleep like a starfish is really difficult. So it's working a lot better for us, thankfully. So I now have my own space to decorate how I see fit. And it can be 100% my taste. And I love it. So I'm really excited about this little corner here. And I've got my wheel next to me. This is Margarita, named for my late grandmother. She's an Ashford Kiwi. and I love her. It's definitely, this wheel is my tried and true spinning buddy. I have a couple of Turkish spindles that I use occasionally, but they really hurt my wrists, and I get really impatient with spindle spinning. So I don't do it very often, but I do have some handspun to show you that I did do on a spindle today. So I didn't do it today. I have it to show you today. I'm going to stop going on tangents for a minute and show you some works in progress. This is what you're going to get with this podcast. I have horrific ADHD. I took my meds today, but they're starting to wear off. It's fine. We're just in it. It's fine. You're here because you want to listen to me, I'm assuming. So if you don't like it, you can just click off of it. Cool. Great. Glad we're in agreement. So I'm going to start with works in progress, and then I have a bunch of finished objects to show you too. Do not know why I just said that like Jim Carrey and the Grinch, but here we are. This I did not show you last time because I had only just cast it on and it would not have been interesting to look at. But this is what I've been working on the most this week. This is also a pattern that you have seen before. I knit my grandfather one of these. It's purple. This is the Candle Flame Lapgan by Nancy Marchand. Excuse me. It is beautiful. I love it. I love how it feels. I love how it looks. I hate how it feels to knit. And it's purely because of the big needles. This is on a size 10 needle. That's really big for me. I usually don't go bigger than an 8, and even that's kind of pushing it. Because larger needles trigger my wrist issue. I have a little bit of residual carpal tunnel. I used to be an artist when I was in high school, and I did a lot of digital painting. And when I say a lot of digital painting, I mean like 12 hours a day. Like when I wasn't in school, I was painting on my computer all day. And when I got home from school, that's all I would do all day. So I developed some carpal tunnel issues. I never actually went full-blown carpal tunnel, but I do have some like repetitive strain stuff that comes up sometimes with knitting. So I have to be really careful. It's part of why I'm such a slow knitter, because I have to be careful about my wrists and my hands. So that aside, that also is affected by one of my disabilities, which I now know that I have. Apparently, I have Hashimoto's disease. Just found this out last week, and that causes some joint problems. So who knew? But my health history aside, this is a lovely pattern. I would recommend it. I'm not going to knit the entire recommended length because I want this to be lap-sized. It is called a lapgan, lap afghan, but it's a little bit more of a throw blanket size that's recommended. So the width is great for your lap, but I'm going to stop after 3 or 4 repeats because my grandparents are both, this is from my grandmother. My grandparents are both in either a wheelchair or very, very heavy use of mobility aids, and I do not want this getting caught up in those. My grandpa loves his. He has pretty severe dementia, but he remembered who I was when my mom dropped it off to him. She also left him a photo of me and him as when I was a kid, so that was really sweet. And she sent me a picture of him eating chocolate pudding wrapped in his blanket, and he loved it. So I'm really glad. And it seems to be a really good size for his wheelchair. So I'm going to stick with the same size. I think it was 4 repeats, but it could have been 3. This is almost 2 complete repeats. So I'm guessing it's going to be 4, so it'll be twice this length. But I love how it looks. I'm ready to be done knitting it because my hands hurt. But I'm making really steady progress. I only had about an inch on this a couple days ago. And thankfully, because it's big needles and thick yarn, it's like an Aran weight yarn. It's working up pretty quick. The yarn is from my late grandmother's stash, Anita. She passed last May and left me all her yarn. So my task now is to make a bunch of family heirlooms with it because I don't typically work, it's all acrylic. I don't typically work with acrylic yarn for myself, but I will 100% knit it for other people. So I'm going to make a bunch of folks in my family some blankets or shawls, probably not garments. I'm going to make my brother a cardigan, but he layers his cardigans because I don't like it. Ooh, sorry, I didn't mean to touch my mic. I don't love layering acrylic next to the skin, and my family has also got sensory issues all across the board, even the ones that aren't autistic. So sensitive skin, sensory issues. The only family member I have that I will never knit in wool for is my mom, because she is very sensitive to any wool. It doesn't matter how soft, extra fine, superwash merino you get, she's still very sensitive. And I suspect that she might be allergic to lanolin. So we're going to stay away from wool for her, but this is almost done. I hope I can get it done in the next week because I want to be done with it so it doesn't hurt to make. But I'm moving along. I'm moving along. What's next? What do I want to talk about next? I have a good couple works in progress right now. I usually have 2 or 3 projects working at the same time. I don't usually have 6 or 7, which is what I have right now. I guess I'll go biggest to smallest. I have a little project bag system. These are actually wig bags. And I like them because they don't create static electricity on my project. So this is a sweater I'm knitting for my partner. And it is actually a matching sweater to one that I made their dog last year. This is the Vargo sweater by Sari Nordlund. I've made a lot more progress on this since the last time you saw it. Still on the yoke, still haven't split for sleeves yet. I haven't touched this in a couple of weeks because I've been working so hard on some other projects, which you're going to see in a minute, and have taken priority, but this is definitely getting close. I have 2 more charts to knit that are a little bit smaller before I split for sleeves. So I really like how this is moving, and once I get done with the color work, it's just stockinette. So that's pretty mindless knitting. I just have to get through the color work part first. I'm actually going to knit one of these for myself too, so this is kind of my test drive to see if I like how it fits. My partner likes about a size up from me, even though we're technically the same measurement. They like a lot more ease, so I usually just size up from what I would knit myself. Oh my god, I keep touching my mic, I'm sorry. I typically just knit a size up from what I would make for myself for them, and it tends to work out pretty well. This yarn is Lion Brand Color. I actually have a scan of it right here. This is Lion Brand Color Theory. In Stonewash is the blue. This actually looks a lot more gray on camera than it looks a lot more blue in person. Stonewash is the blue, and the gray is Satellite. And this is a little more true to color. I don't know when I'm going to finish this thing, but I really want to get it to them before it gets too warm to wear a sweater, because I know that they want to match Obi and take some pictures in it. So that's going to be my next project that I spend a bunch of time working on, trying to finish. So I really love it. It's a really fun knit, and it's a very it's a pretty simple color work repeat, and it's made up of pretty intuitive looking patterns, and even if you don't have the chart in front of you, you can probably guess what's coming next in a lot of cases. So I'm really pleased about that. I love a pattern that feels intuitive, and I'm enjoying it so far. I don't have anything else to say about that one. I'm not super far along in it. I don't have any serious thoughts about it yet. I still have some socks on my needles. I have 2 pairs of socks on my needles, actually. This is still the socks that I was working on last time. I've made a little bit of progress. These are my therapy socks, therapy socks, meeting socks. And it's just plain stockinette, and I knit on it when I'm in therapy because it's basically a stim for me. This is how it looks. It's a little darker in person. The main color, the variegated, is Nerdy Knits sock in Prismatic Shard. If you know me, you know I love Stardew Valley, so if it's Stardew themed, I've got to have it. And then the contrasting cuff and the heel and what's going to be the toe is Teeny Button Studio Soft Sock in the colorway Sophie, which is inspired by Anastasia. One of my favorite childhood movies is just a mini that I got from Robin last time. She had that collection open. So I'm enjoying how they look together. I also promised my kid's sister-in-law, who's 11, that if I had leftover yarn, I would make her a little matching shorty pair. So we'll see how much I have left. It's looking like I left plenty. So Sienna might be getting some socks too. And then I also have another pair of socks that are very exciting because they're a new design. So this is the first one that I have finished. I started the second. I haven't made it super far. But the test call is open for these, so I'm going to plug it here before I finish them. This is what the lace pattern looks like. It's kind of hard to see. Let me see if you can see it better on my skin. This is a lace take on my classic simple socks pattern, which is just a plain vanilla German short row heel sock, cuff down. I don't normally use DPNs to knit my socks. It's contentious for me. I usually use the ChowGoo little shorties because it's just easier. And I find that I don't get any laddering at all with that. I do with DPNs. I've tried everything. So if you have tips, give them, but I may have already tried it. This sock yarn, oh my god, this is Arcane Fiberworks. Actually, I do have another full skein of this. Hold on. I do. It's all the way at the bottom, of course. So this colorway, it's called Wildwood. Again, it looks a little bit lighter on camera, but it's some really nice foresty greens and browns. And the socks are aptly named the Wildwood Socks because I actually found this yarn. I was buying some yarn for a sweater for a friend of mine that I have not started yet and probably won't for a while. But I was looking for some yarn for them, and they happened to send me Arcane Fiberworks Blazing Birch colorway, which is like an orangey, it's like an autumn birch forest kind of a vibe. And they sent it to me because it reminded them, Ray is an author, that's my friend's name, and it reminded them a lot of one of the books that they have wrote that I've read. So they shared it with me saying, oh my god, it's just like the book, and happened to find this yarn that also very well encapsulates that book that is not yet published, but hopefully will be one day. Fingers crossed. So I felt really inspired, so I got 2 skeins of it, and this will probably be a hat of some kind someday, but the other skein is being made into socks. So I'm pumped about it. I'm really excited about this pattern. Again, the stitch pattern's kind of hard to see on camera, but I have some better photos of it on my Instagram on my test call slides. So if you would like to test knit this pattern, part of the reason it's tough to see on camera is because of the variegated yarn. That's a little bit better. It's always going to be harder to see lace on a variegated yarn. I happen to like it. Not everybody does, but this would also look beautiful in a solid color. So the test call for that one closes on March 1st, I want to say. And it's going to be open for 4 weeks. So it'll start March 3rd and end on March 31st. Those are both Sundays. So I'm excited. I have a couple more slots for that open. I'm all set for size 3, but every other size has some spaces available if you would like to test knit that pattern. So there's a link in my Instagram bio if you would like. I'll also put a link in the description where you can apply. Also got another test knit open that I'm going to talk about at the end. So these 2 can be yours for the low price of free. Super fun. I really like those though, and the Arcane Fiberworks 80/20 sock yarn is maybe the softest sock yarn I've ever worked with that's still durable, if that makes sense. It's still got, I mean, it's not a 2-ply, which is a plus. A lot of sock yarns, I do love a 2-ply sock yarn, but they do wear through a little bit quicker. But this is, I want to say, a 4-ply. I don't think it says. Could probably figure it out if I picked it apart, but I'm not going to do that on camera. Yeah, it doesn't say, but I think it's a 4-ply. Looks like a 4-ply, but it's still incredibly soft. It doesn't feel like twine or rope. Even in the skein, it's just incredibly skin friendly. So I actually really want to make a sweater out of that one day, but I have to knit through some of my stash first before I do that. So I think that's just about it for works in progress. I have one other work in progress that I'm going to show off now, and then you'll probably never see it again until it's finished because it's a long-term one. sort of like my beekeeper's quilt. I needed a project that would just stay next to my bed because being chronically ill, sometimes it's hard to just lug my knitting bag around. Sometimes I'm already in bed and I'm like, oh, I'm feeling a little bit better, but I want to be knitting and I don't want to get up. So I cast on a Slipstravaganza blanket by Stephen West in Drops Air. Don't remember the colorways. I'll put them in the description. I'm sorry. But I haven't made a ton of progress on it recently, but I am moving along. And this is really good, like, trash TV knitting because it's so methodical and it's so big. So you can kind of just like read the instructions for your one row and then you're like, okay, got it. And you just go for 20 minutes. And even then, like, this is even still pretty small, but once it starts to grow a little bit more, I'm going to probably be on a second circular because this thing is huge. And I'm knitting the big size because, again, I want it to live next to my bed and just kind of be a perpetual project. I'm not really too worried about it getting done. It's more just like a bedside stim kind of project. So I'm excited about this, and I haven't touched it in a few days, but I'm getting close to wanting to do that again. So there might be some knitting on that this weekend. We'll see. But I really do like the pattern, though, and I love a circular throw blanket. I've never made one, but I've always wanted to. So this is kind of a bucket list thing for me. And you'll probably never see that project again, at least not until it's done, if it's ever done. But I hope it is. I hope it is. I hope I get to snuggle up in it one day because it's very soft. And I love that Drops Air blown yarn. If you've never knit with Drops Air before, actually, I wonder if I can show you really quickly. Because, again, I've just embraced this is kind of going to be a chatty video. It's like going to be a little bit of a longer episode, y'all. Sorry, not sorry? I'm not sorry. So this is Drops Air. This is a blown yarn, which basically means instead of being spun traditionally in plies that interlock like this, it's a nylon mesh tube. And they hook it up to a machine, and they basically blow wool and alpaca fibers into the tube. And the fiber, I don't know how well you can see this because it's a little bit of a darker color. The fibers end up, it's going to be hard to see that. The fibers end up trapped in this tube, and there's a little bit of a halo to it, and it's incredibly lightweight. So the yardage for the weight of the ball of yarn is really good. And it's also, again, being a lighter weight yarn, it's not going to feel as heavy if you make this into a garment or a blanket or something larger. So that's why I picked it for this project, because if I'm going to make a blanket, again, I overheat really quickly. I wanted it to be at least breathable enough that it wasn't going to suffocate me. So I've got that lighter, it's over here. Oopsie. I've got that lighter blanket project, and then one day in like 300 years when I'm done knitting Hexie Puffs, I'll have a beekeeper's quilt that's nice and heavy. So that's exciting. I love that. I love a blanket. That's all I'm working on at the moment. I have a couple of secret works in progress, but I'm not going to talk about them yet because they're secrets. But I really want to talk about them, so this is my little acknowledgement that they're happening. I will talk about them at some point, but I'm not ready to share them yet. So, on to finished objects. I do have a good few of these as well, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about some designs I've got upcoming. First thing I finished was like literally the week I posted the last episode, so it's been forever since I actually finished this. This is just a headband I knit for my partner because they can't find the one that I made them 2 years ago, and they wanted a new one, so I used some of my Handspun. This is Three Waters Farm Winter Greens is the colorway in, I think the fiber is merino. It's definitely not superwash. I think it's merino, pretty sure. And this is just, I was experimenting with bulkier singles and chain plying, so I just spun a little bit bulkier of a single than I normally would, and I chain plied it. And the end result was interesting. My singles were not super consistent, so it's a little bit thick and thin, but I actually kind of like the texture. And the headband itself, this is the, oh god, I can't remember how to pronounce the name. I think it's Epicea headband. It's a free pattern on Ravelry. I wrote the designer's name down, and now I cannot for the life of me remember what it is, but I will link it in the description. because I like to give credit where credit's due. It's very important. This is in seersucker stitch, which is one of my all-time favorite stitch patterns, and Alex loves this. It's nice and thick and wide. I can't really make them hats because they have massive hair. Alex is black and typically has braids or locks, and when they pile it all on top of their head, it's impossible to get a hat over it. And even if they have their hair down, which is very rare, it's still like it's pretty much an ordeal to even get it to stay on their head. So a headband usually goes over a lot easier. So this is for Alex, and they're loving it so far. I had to steal it, and I have to remember to put it back just to show you because they've been wearing it. But it's nicer out this week, so hopefully they won't need it. So that's the first one. That was a quick knit. That took like 2 days. The other finished objects that I have for you are not knits. They are handspun. I have been spinning up a storm since we talked last, and I will start with my 100 days of spindle spinning challenge. I told myself I wasn't going to limit myself to 100 days because I'm disabled and because I knew that if I took on too much than I could handle, I wouldn't do it at all. So I told myself I'm just going to spin 2 ounces of fiber, and however long it takes me is however long it takes me. And this is what I ended up with. It's really gorgeous. This was, the colorway is Sugar Plum Majesty. These were Rolags from the Woolly Witch on Etsy. I loved spinning these. I want a million of them. This has, oh god, what did it have inside of it? Merino, alpaca, silk, and Angelina. So most of it is like various shades of purples, but there's a little bit of gold silk in there. Right here you can kind of see there's some pops of like a yellow ochre wool that is very sparse, but they are in there. And there's little bits of sparkle, there's a little bit of halo. I just love it. It's so soft. I want to sleep in it. But it was only 2 ounces of fiber, so I didn't get a ton of yardage out of it. This is 49 grams and 271 yards. So this is about a fingering, it's like a light fingering weight. It's pretty fine. This is a 2-ply. So I'm going to pair this with American U fingering in Lavender Muffin, and I'm going to make a junction pullover by Andrea Mowry, which I've had that pattern sitting in my library forever. I'm trying to clear out my library and knit the patterns that I've bought but not made. So I have a bunch of Andrea Mowry patterns in there. It's probably actually disproportionate to like the designers that I follow because I ended up picking a bunch of her patterns up on sale for one of her birthday sales one year. So now I have a crap ton of Andrea Mowry patterns waiting to be knit. I think the same is true for Stephen West shawls. I have a bunch of Stephen West patterns that I have to knit. And I love so many more designers than just those two, but you wouldn't know it from my library. It's really unfortunate, but not for the beautiful things that I'm going to be making with this yarn. So I am excited. I'm probably not going to get to this for a while, but that's my plan. I have 3 skeins of 3 4-ounce skeins of this. There's also 8-ounce skeins of the American U yarns, at least if you buy it from Cece's Wool, which is one of my local yarn stores, and I highly recommend buying from them. Cece is wonderful. This is one of my favorite yarns of all time. It really is, in any weight, really. I've used the DK, I've used the bulky. This is going to be my first time using the fingering, but it's an identical fiber every time, and the yarns themselves aren't identical per se, but the characteristics are pretty close, and the characteristics of the wool really shine through. It's a 50-50 merino rambly non-superwash. And holy cow, I love it so much. I'm obsessed with this yarn. If I keep talking about it, I'm never going to stop, so I'm going to stop myself there, but I have grand plans for that handspun. The second handspun, I have 3 to share. That was the first one. This is the second. I have 2 skeins of this. When I got my spinning wheel last summer, it came with a bag of mystery wool from the Woolery. Love them to death. Have no idea what kind of wool this was. So I decided to use it as a testing medium to try out my new blending board, which I got a month or so ago. So I blended the mystery wool. It ended up being about a medium staple. It's a little bit coarse for my liking. I blended it with some silks and a little bit of baby alpaca. Each ply is actually different. So one ply is blended with a little bit of silk and a little bit of the BFL left over from the slippers that I'm wearing, actually, because I didn't use all the fiber. So I took the remaining, there was about 1.5 ounces of fiber left over, maybe 2 ounces. So I blended that up with it and some silk in matching colors and a little bit of, actually a lot of Angelina. I was a little glitter happy. Made Rolex out of that, spun that as one single, and then the other two, one of them is just the mystery wool blended into Rolex, and the other is 50% of that mystery wool, 50% a gray natural baby alpaca. So I am torn about this. I like how it turned out. I like how it looks. It's about a DK weight, maybe a light worsted. And I got a decent amount of yardage for what it is. But I don't know. I'm not sold on the texture. I have to see it knit up first. I'm not sold. I think it's going to be a little scratchy, but I'm going to make it into a sweater anyway. I have 4 colors of alpaca DK from Long Dog Yarn coming this summer, probably, maybe spring, from the Princess Bride collection that just dropped. I just got a skein of 4 colorways, 1 skein each. And I'm going to knit a Collins sweater with this. I forget the designer for that pattern too now that I'm thinking about it, but I'll put that in the description too. I mean, this is actually going to be the contrast color, and then I'm going to stripe the other 4 colorways, and they're all colors that are found in here. There's one that's like a darker blue, there's 2 purples, and a yellow. So I'm not super sold that I'm going to like it, but I'm hoping the alpaca DK adds a little softness that this does not have. Again, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. But I think it's pretty. Turned out cute. And my partner helped me make the roll egg, so that's even more fun. And the third handspun that I finished is not off the bobbin yet. I have 2 bobbins of this. Plied it the other day. Have not skeined it. Have no idea what the yardage is, but I made this for a friend's mom, actually. My childhood friend, Courtney, and I went to college together. And her mom knits, has knit Courtney's entire life, at least. And a while ago, when I started spinning, she made a comment like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if Catherine could make me some yarn? So I've been secretly plotting behind the scenes to make her some handspun for like the past 2 years. Just haven't gotten to it until now. But I finally finished it. So it's about like a DK, maybe a light worsted. Again, I spun this a little thicker than I usually would. My default yarn is about a sport weight, 2-ply. This is 2 plies as well. I deliberately spun it a little bit thicker because the fiber I used is a commercially blended fiber. You can kind of see it if you look. Okay. Really? Could we not? Maybe? That'd be great. Thank you. I'm not a huge fan of commercially blended fibers. Where the fiber is kind of, let's see if I can focus this. No, probably not. Where the fiber is kind of like, it blended together in lines in the comb top instead of dyed onto the wool in patches. So I like them sometimes. This particular one has a lot of pink and a lot of green. And if you know anything about color theory, when you blend pinks and greens together, you basically get brown. So I was hoping that the pink would come out a little bit more. It does depend on the lighting. It looks a lot more brown in this lighting, and because there's a lot of silk and bamboo in this, it's merino silk and bamboo, but there's a decent amount of silk and bamboo. It's got a bit of a sheen. So in some lights it looks a little bit more dungy, which I don't love, but I think it's cool. You can see kind of some streaks of the color, and that's also part of the reason I spun it a little bulkier, because you can see the striations of the color more clearly. If I had spun it super fine, it would have just been straight up brown and ugly. So it sort of went well, sort of didn't. Again, it was also kind of a spinning experiment for me because I've never spun commercial top or commercially blended top like this on my wheel. I've done it on an e-spinner and on a spindle, but never on a wheel. So for better or for worse, it went okay. But it's about 220 grams. somewhere around 8 ounces, something like that. But that is going to get scanned up and sent to her, hopefully in the next 2 weeks or so. Because I keep forgetting to do it, but I think it's going to look nice once it's been washed. I'm not a huge fan of the ply twist on the bobbin, but I think once I wash it and it fluffs up a bit, it'll look nicer. But that's all of my finished objects for now. I don't have a whole lot else to share aside from some design things. So I did have a pattern release while I was gone. I released the Rivers and Roads cowl this month in February. Oops, I just dropped one. I have 2 samples of this one. This is the one that I originally knit for the pattern photos. This is knit in Explorer Knits Boucle DK in the colorways Chinle and Drift. I'm obsessed with these colors together. I can't stop looking at them constantly. I freaking love this cowl. I specifically designed it because every bandana cowl I've ever made has sat too close to my neck, and I don't like how it feels like it's suffocating me, so I wanted this to have a bit of a more open, drapier neckline. So that was part of why I wanted to design this the way that I did. But I've also been looking for a bandana cowl that's knit in brioche for a really long time, and I've always been kind of transfixed with the stripiness of syncopated brioche. So I think it turned out really beautifully. I had to frog this like 5 or 6 times when I was knitting the sample while I was writing it, because I just could not get the shaping right. So this feels very much like a triumph for me that I like finally figured it out. And my test knitters had great feedback for me, so I'm really excited. The versions that my test knitters came up with are stunning. We have some that did it in boucle like I did. We have some that did it in just a straight up, like a superwash merino DK, which looks beautiful. I also have made myself a second one. This one is a little bit smaller on the neckline, but I knit this in Nerdy Knits DK, which is the variegated colorway in the colorway Ysolda. And the tonal colorway is the colorway Zonai and Sport and Mohair held together. So I kind of just wanted to see how this would look knit in a non-boucle yarn, honestly, but I also really love this version. I find it kind of hard to wear mohair because it heats me up really quickly. So this is, for me, a little bit of an outerwear accessory, but if you run really cold, that thing is great to wear around your neck when you're cuddling up, because it's loose enough that it's not going to feel like it's choking you, and it's not going to feel like you're bundled up against the cold, but it's also a heavy enough fabric that it's still going to keep that warm air close to your neck, and it's going to keep you nice and warm. So it's a really, really good transitional accessory, like when it's not super winter coat weather, but you're still cold with a sweater on. Help you keep some of that residual heat next to your body. And we have plenty of those days in upstate New York, and we're about to get a lot more of them. So hoping to get a lot more wear out of those in the next month or so. Yeah, I'm excited about that. I'm very proud of this pattern. You can buy it on Ravelry or on my website. I will include links for both down below. And I hope you enjoy it if you decide to knit one, because it's like a potato chip knit. You can't really make just one. My second design announcement is that I have 2, not 1, but 2 testing calls open. So the first is the Wildwood Socks that I showed you earlier. That one closes very soon. I have almost no spots left in that, so if you want to apply to that, do it quick. The second, I do need more people for. This is the Mountain Glow shawl. My goal is to have this test run from March 3rd to April 28th, which is 8 weeks. That's a pretty long time for a shawl. So there's plenty of time to get this done. I'm in no hurry. My tech editor still has it, in fact, so I'm looking to keep the application form open for another week, maybe. I'm supposed to get that back from her on Wednesday, and I want to include a little buffer in case I have more edits to make. So I want this to go live next weekend, ideally to start that test next weekend, but that depends on if enough people apply, because I have a very small pool of test knitters this early in my design career. So if this looks like a fun knit for you, consider applying to test it. It is like the beginner color work dream. if you've never knit stranded colorwork and you're terrified of colorwork in general and you don't want to try stranded colorwork just yet, this might be right for you. It is extremely simple increases, no decreasing. There's mostly stockinette up top, so you can kind of warm yourself up a little bit, get your hands moving. We've got some garter ridges in different pops of color. We've got a little fading going on here. And then once you've gotten comfortable with your yarn and your needles, you've got a little bit of momentum built, then we get to start the real star of the show, which is this beautiful border. The checkerboard, which is mosaic colorwork. If you've never knit colorwork, this is a great way to start because you're only ever working with one strand of yarn at a time. And you're basically slipping stitches and working the ones in that color. And then you're going to go ahead and work that row one more time in the other color. So it's a very approachable way to experiment with colorwork if you've never tried it before. And then the end is even more fun. It's this slip stitch garter border. And it's squishy and delightful. This is the perfect size shawl to wrap around your neck. It's a little bit more of a mid-size shawl. I find it, I'm a little bit of a mid to larger size. I tend to be around like a 46 to 48 inch upper bust, depending on the day, depending on like time of year, hormones, things like that. And this I am able to wrap around my shoulders, but it is a little small for me. I'm not always a wrap around the shoulders kind of shawl person. Again, like it's still gonna be able to wrap. It's still wrappable. But if you really love that like super duper schlanket oversized style, one thing you can do is you can make sure you've got like an extra skein of yarn in the A and B colors, which is this pale color and the gray. And you can knit it on a larger needle size. And that will give you a little bit more real estate so you can really wrap yourself up in it, get all cozy. Or you could also knit it in a worsted weight yarn. This is a really, really fun knit. It's very straightforward. It's just stockinette knit flat for most of it. Again, some people find that a slog. Some people find it great TV knitting. I went through so many seasons of Survivor when I was knitting this shawl. I actually really enjoyed it. So I'm considering making another one, but I have too many things to knit right now, so not yet, but maybe one day. If you would like to test knit this, the form's going to be open for probably the next week, so jump on that because I would love to have you. And I need more people. So you can use, again, it's an 8-week testing window. It's super long. It's not at all a hurry. This is not a pattern that I'm going to force you to like whip through. I want people to get their hands on this pattern and tell me what they think of it, basically. So you can use any yarn to your heart's desire. I used Explorer Knits Cashmere DK with Ward. I almost said boucle again. This is very obviously not boucle. The color A that I use, this tan beige, is linen, which for me is the perfect neutral because it doesn't wash me out as much as some do. The gray is called timber. And then I've got my 3 smaller contrast colors. The yellow is called pollen, oxide, and to the stars who listen. So you can use the same yarn I did if you've got it in your stash. If you don't, you can use whatever DK yarn you want. You could also use a worsted weight yarn. You could use Handspun if you really want to. This is really such a painter's canvas for color. So if you love playing with color and seeing colors interact together, this might be the one for you. That's one of the top reasons I love knitting is playing with color. I actually like tonals more than I like variegated colorways most times. And most of my variegated colorways end up in my sock pile. Like most of these are not tonals because my tonals make it into larger projects. So I've only got like 2 or 3 skeins of like a solid color yarn in my sock stash because when I see a beautiful variegated skein, I can't usually think of a garment I want to make it into, but I can always make it into socks. That's just my personal preference. So a lot of my patterns reflect that, like the color work. Hello. Yeah, that's what I've got coming down the pipeline design-wise. 2 test knits open. Apply if you would like, please. I would love to have you. If you are interested in getting updates about future test knits, if you want discounts when I launch patterns, because everybody loves a discount. If you want some little updates here and there about things going on behind the scenes, if you want to be notified when a new podcast episode drops, you should sign up for my newsletter on my website, which is www.gingerdognits.com. Link that in the description for you. This is new from last time. I set my website up while I was gone. That's also part of the reason I was gone, because that took a lot of labor. But I really love it, and it's really functional for what I need right now. And the newsletter's great, and it's a great way to find out about all things Ginger Dog Knits. So I've got a lot to share with you over the course of like the next year. I have a lot of designs that I'm working on at the moment. I have a lot of ideas, some collaborations. Not going to tease too much yet, but absolutely stick around, because I would love to have you. I would love to make some new fiber arts friends, because I'm a pretty reclusive person when it comes to making friends, because I'm disabled and I can't always get out of the house, and social situations in person are very stressful for me, but I love interacting online. So please, if this vibe is yours, if we are one and the same, get a hold of me, because I would love that. I think that's mostly it. The last thing I want to end on is Q&A. So I have a little Q&A form. If you would like to ask me a question, you can drop it in that form. It's linked in the description. I have one question from Amy, who is one of my test knitters. Hello, Amy. Amy test knit the Rivers and Roads cowl not once but twice. So kudos to you, Amy, for double dipping. Amy's question is, and I have it written down, it's a 3-parter. What's your favorite thing to knit? Are there any other fiber arts you like? And then also loved seeing that purple blanket. It's gorgeous, and he'll love it, talking about my grandpa. And he did love it, so thank you, Amy. That's very sweet of you. I really enjoyed that purple blanket too, and I'm selfishly like a little bit excited to inherit that back one day, but hopefully not any day soon, because I love my grandpa and I want him to stick around. Yeah, so my favorite thing to knit, it really depends on the time of year sometimes. I used to be really into socks, and I haven't been lately. I recently have been really just wanting to knit garments, especially sweaters and t-shirts, which is ironic because I have not knit one in almost a year, except for my partner's Vargo sweater that I'm working on. They used to scare me a ton, so I don't have a lot of garment knitting experience, for one. I mean, this was my first sweater, and I only knit it 2 years ago, so I really only have 3 hand knit sweaters, and 2 of them don't fit because my gauge was off. So thankfully, I have one that does fit, and I have knit other garments. I've knit my partner a sweater vest and a couple other things, but not for myself. If there's no parameters, if I'm knitting for myself, if I have like full creative license to do whatever I want, usually I'm going to reach for some kind of like a... Millie, stop booping my tripod. Usually I'm going to reach for a sweater or a t-shirt, just because that's what's inspiring me right now. But if I am like traveling, usually I'll bring a sock with me, because they're super portable. I went to New Orleans last summer, and I pretty much survived that trip. Again, being autistic, traveling is hard on me, especially when we're just doing stuff all day, every day. I would just keep my ball of yarn in a fanny pack and just be knitting on a sock, walking through the city. And I finished 2 pairs of socks that way. Actually, 2.5. No, 1.5. I finished 1 pair of socks, and then I finished 1 whole sock and started a 4th. So, yeah, I mean, again, it kind of depends on what I'm doing. If I'm just sitting at home, it's usually a garment of some kind. And I have a lot of plans for some garments for the next year. I have a lot in my Ravelry queue. I also have, again, like I've mentioned, like my next year or so of knitting is also going to be peppered with knitting through my late grandmother's stash to make some family heirlooms, because she passed last year, and I really want to make sure that, actually, it's kind of a goal for me to have most of those done by this coming Christmas to give as gifts. So I'd like to be able to do that. I'm going to make something for my sister, my brother, my dad, his brother, and his daughter, my cousin. At this point, there might be more, and I'm gonna make myself a couple of things, but that's not on a deadline, because I can do that whenever I want. So, I'm not giving myself I mean, I am giving myself a gift, but I don't need to do it by Christmas. I would rather give gifts to other people first and then have time to knit mine without a deadline kind of encroaching. So, yeah, yeah. If you asked me a year ago, I would have said shawls. I have a lot of shawls compared to garments. I do like a shawl. I'm getting a little sick of them lately. I think it's just the repetition. I've just knit a lot of shawls in the last year. I'm getting sick of it. Because once you get to that edge border, it can be a real slog if you are not knitting a super complex pattern. But even then, a lot of times when you're knitting a shawl, you don't want it to be super complex because that's like your TV knitting. At least it is for me. So, yeah, I don't know that I'm on the shawl train right now, but I very much bounce back onto it here and there. So, and I have a lot of, I tend to purchase yarn with a project in mind. So if there's a yarn that I want to buy, I have to find myself a project that it's going to work well in before I buy it. That's my rule. So I typically don't just have stash yarn sitting around without something in mind for it. So I have a lot of shawls and garments actually in mind for the next year or so. I'm actually really excited about it. And I hope I get to some of them because that means that I've finished the last couple projects that are stressing me out. Like this blanket for my grandma with the big needles. It's beautiful again, but holy crap, does it hurt. So this has been an hour-long episode, so I'm going to end it off here. Again, if you have a question for me next time, you can drop it in my question form. Sign up for my newsletter. You can hit subscribe on this channel if you want updates, and I'll see you next time. I think that's all I got. Take good care of yourself. That's something I've been struggling with lately. So if you're feeling tired, take a break. If you're feeling hungry, take a snack. If your head is moving around a little bit too much for your liking, take a sick day, you know? Sometimes you can't afford to do that, but sometimes you can't afford not to. So I hope you take a moment today to think about what you need and to do something for yourself. So I will see you next time, hopefully not in a month, and happy knitting.